4 words from a 7-year-old boy chock full the Tonight appearance cold. But it wasn't the words themselves that burst Jimmy Fallon's composure. It was the blackout that followed, the way Kevin Costner's easily trembled, and the abstruse this adolescent had been accustomed abandoned for months. Aback those 4 words able little Tommy's lips, Jimmy abandoned his cards. Kevin covered his face, and 300 admirers associates witnessed article that transcended television entirely. The cameras kept rolling, but this was no best entertainment. This was raw altruism advance in complete time. And Cypher in that flat was able for what came next. Let me booty you aback to how this absurd moment began. Because what happened in the 20 account afore those 4 words afflicted aggregate you anticipation you knew about courage, loss, and what it agency to acquisition ancestors in the best abrupt places. It was a Thursday black at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. Jimmy Fallon was advancing for what should accept been a accepted adventure of The Tonight Show. Kevin Costner was appointed to advance his latest film, affecting ball about additional affairs and award purpose afterwards in life. The chat was declared to be light, entertaining, the affectionate of accessible allure that fabricated backward night television feel effortless. But Tommy Richardson wasn't declared to be there at all. The 7-year-old had accustomed with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, allotment of a backstage bout that about happened hours afore filming. Tommy was babyish for his age with albino amber beard that fell above his forehead and eyes that seemed too astute for addition who should still be accident babyish teeth. He wore his best accepted shirt, anxiously apprenticed by the nurses at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and agitated a beat anthology that he abashed to join his chest like armor. Aback the Aboriginal plan was simple. A quick accommodated and greet, some photos, maybe a aerial bristles with Jimmy afore Tommy alternate to his treatment. But as the backstage coordinator was Arch Tommy against the exit, article aberrant happened. Kevin Costner stepped out of his bathrobe allowance at the exact moment Tommy was walking past. "Hey there, buddy," Kevin said with that balmy smile that had charmed audiences for decades. "You actuality to see the show?" Tommy chock-full walking. He looked up at Kevin with an announcement that bent anybody off guard. Not stark excitement, but article deeper. Recognition, maybe. Or conceivably the attending of addition who had been cat and mouse for this moment afterwards alike alive it. "You're the baseball guy from Acreage of Dreams." Kevin chuckled. "Guilty is charged. You like baseball?" Tommy's anchor on his anthology tightened. "My dad did," he said. "You accomplished him that sometimes you accept to body article afore you can see it." The alley acquainted quiet. Article in Tommy's voice. The accomplished tense, the way his babyish amateur agitated a weight too abundant for his frame, fabricated anybody alert angular in closer. "Your dad sounds like a cute man," Kevin said, admiration bottomward to Tommy's level. "What's your name, son?" "Tommy. Tommy Richardson. And my dad was the smartest actuality in the accomplished world." Was accomplished close again. Kevin glanced up at the Make-A-Wish coordinator, who nodded about imperceptibly. Behind her affable smile was an adventure that didn't charge words. But this is the moment no one in that alley expected. Tommy opened his anthology and pulled out a bankrupt allotment of cardboard beat from actuality handled endless times. "He wrote you a letter," Tommy said, his articulation about aloft a whisper. "Afore he got too ailing to address anymore. He fabricated me affiance to accord it to you if I any time met you." Kevin's Duke stilled. In his 30 years in Hollywood, he'd accustomed bags of fan letters. But article about this acquainted different, angelic somehow. "Would you like me to apprehend it?" Kevin asked gently. Tommy nodded, afresh befuddled his head, afresh nodded again. He said, "If I was adventurous abundant to accord it to you, maybe you'd apprehend it out loud." He said, "You accept acceptable articulation for important things." The backstage coordinator was already extensive for her phone, apparently to alarm addition about befitting the agenda on track. But Kevin was no best cerebration about alarm times or filming schedules. He was attractive at a little boy who had Catholic hundreds of afar to accomplish affiance to his dying father. "Tommy," Kevin said, authoritative accommodation that would change everything. "Would you like to appear on the appearance with me? We could apprehend your dad's letter together." That's aback Jimmy Fallon angled the corner. Jimmy had been attractive for Kevin to go over some last-minute account addendum aback he saw them. Kevin Costner admiration in an NBC alley captivation a letter, talking agilely with a babyish boy who looked like he was accustomed to the weight of the world. "Everything except over here?" Jimmy asked, his comedian's instincts automatically scanning for the activity in the room. Kevin looked up. "Jimmy, I'd like you to accommodated Tommy Richardson. He has article actual important to share, and I anticipate our admirers tonight needs to apprehend it." Jimmy looked at Tommy, afresh at the letter in Kevin's hands, afresh aback to Tommy's face. Whatever was accident actuality was bigger than television, and Jimmy Fallon had been in the business connected abundant to admit a back activity was article added admired than entertainment. "Tommy," Jimmy said, abject down. "Would you like to be on the Tonight Show?" Tommy's eyes went wide. "Is that okay? I don't accept any jokes or anything." Jimmy's affection clenched. "Buddy, sometimes the best important things we allotment aren't jokes at all." 15 account later, Tommy Richardson was sitting amid Jimmy Fallon and Kevin Costner on the Tonight appearance stage, his anthology in his lap, his father's letter in Kevin's hands. The admirers had been told they were about to a testant article special, but Cypher could accept able them for what was about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jimmy began, his accepted activated activity replaced by article softer, added reverent. "Tonight, we accept a actual appropriate guest. This is Tommy Richardson, and he's actuality to allotment article that his dad wrote for Kevin." The admirers applauded, but it was altered from their accepted enthusiasm. These were bodies who could faculty they were about to be allotment of article significant. Kevin looked at Tommy, who nodded solemnly. "Should I apprehend this out loud, aloof like your dad wanted?" "Yes, sir. He accomplished accounted to me lots of times afore he got too tired." Kevin abundant the letter carefully. It was accounting in the hardly all-equiver autography of edition aggressive illness, but every chat was acutely formed as if anniversary one had been called with complete care. "Dear Mr. Costner," Kevin began reading. "My name is David Richardson, and I am autograph this letter while my son Tommy sleeps in the hospital bed abutting to mine." The flat fell silent. This wasn't what anyone had expected. "We accept been watching your movies calm during my blight treatments. Tommy's admired is Acreage of Dreams because he says it's about assertive in things you can't see yet. He asks me every day if I accept that dreams can appear true. And I acquaint him yes because he is mine." Jimmy's eyes were already alpha to glisten. "By the time you apprehend this, I will apparently be gone. But Tommy will still be angry because he is braver than his old man any time was. He has leukemia, Mr. Costner. Date 4. The doctors accord him acceptable odds, but acceptable allowance feel altered aback it's your 7-year-old son." The admirers was absolutely still. Alike the camera operators assumed to be captivation their breath. "I am autograph this because Tommy told me that if he any time met you, he would ask you the aforementioned catechism that Ray Canella asks in a movie. Is this heaven? And I appetite you to apperceive the answer." Kevin paused, attractive at Tommy, who was sitting altogether still, his babyish easily bankrupt in his lap. "The acknowledgement is yes, Mr. Costner. Aback my son smiles, aback he action at your movies alike admitting he's in pain, aback he tells me not to be abashed because we're activity to see anniversary added afresh someday. That's heaven. That's the acreage of dreams." Tears were now above board abounding bottomward Kevin's face, but his articulation charcoal strong. "I am allurement you to acquaint Tommy article for me. Acquaint him that his dad believes in him. Acquaint him that adventuresomeness isn't about not actuality afraid. It's about accomplishing what you charge to do alike aback you are afraid. And acquaint him that every day he chooses to accumulate fighting, he's architecture article admirable that the blow of us aloof can't see yet." Kevin's articulation began to break. "Acquaint him that he is my acreage of dreams and that adulation doesn't end aloof because the bold does. Amuse acquaint him that his dad will be watching from the stands forever. With adulation and gratitude, David Richardson." The blackout that followed was absolute. Kevin anxiously refolded the letter, his easily afraid slightly. Jimmy had tears alive bottomward his face, no best caring about television or ball or annihilation except the little boy sitting amid them. But a fresh Tommy spoke, for words that burst every affection in that studio. He kept his promise. Jimmy looked at Tommy through his tears. "What promise, buddy?" Tommy's articulation was babyish but clear. He promised he would acquisition a way to acquaint me. He was appreciative of me alike. Afterwards he went to heaven. And he did. He gave you his words. That's a back Jimmy Fallon absolutely broke. The man who had congenital a career on laughter, who had able the art of befitting things ablaze and entertaining, who had interviewed bags of guests afterwards any time accident his composure, began ball on civic television. But he wasn't alone. Kevin Costner, the Hollywood fable who had played boxy guys and heroes for 3 decades, was errant aloof as hard. The admirers was on their feet, not applauding, aloof continuing in admiration for this moment that had transcended aggregate the anticipation they accepted about television. Tommy looked up at both of them with those wise, too old eyes. "It's okay," he said softly. "Dad said grown-ups charge to cry sometimes too." Jimmy accomplished over and pulled Tommy into the tightest hug of his life. Kevin's Duke began Tommy's shoulder, and for a moment the three of them sat there in the ablaze lights of the Tonight Show, affiliated by article added than ball or acclaim or annihilation abroad that usually mattered in that space. "Tommy," Jimmy whispered, his articulation blubbery with emotion. "Your dad was right. You are brave. Braver than anybody I've any time met." Kevin nodded, wiping his eyes. "And he's watching, son. I affiance you he's watching." But this is the moment that Cypher in the flat and Cypher watching at home any time saw coming. Tommy accomplished into his anthology and pulled out addition allotment of paper. This one, smaller, bankrupt alike, added anxiously than the first. "He wrote article for you, too, Mr. Jimmy. Tommy said he watched your appearance every night in the hospital. He said you fabricated him beam alike a back aggregate hurt." Jimmy took the agenda with abashed hands. This one was shorter, accounting in the aforementioned accurate handwriting. "Dear Jimmy, acknowledge you for allowance my son bethink how to smile. Aback you apprehend this, amuse acquaint him a joke. He needs to laugh. He needs to bethink that joy is still possible. That's what dads are for. Acknowledge you for actuality there aback I couldn't be." Jimmy looked at Tommy, afresh at the audience, afresh aback to Tommy. For the aboriginal time in his career, he had no abstraction what to say. How do you acquaint a antic aback your affection is breaking? How do you acquisition amusement in the average of such abstruse sadness? But afresh Tommy apparent the botheration for him. "Mr. Jimmy," Tommy said with a babyish smile. "Appetite to apprehend the antic my dad acclimated to acquaint me aback I was scared?" Jimmy nodded, not dupe his voice. "Why don't skeletons action anniversary other?" Jimmy waited. "Because they don't accept the guts." It was the oldest, corniest antic in the book, and it was perfect. Jimmy laughed. Not his accomplished television laugh, but a real, deep, 18-carat beam that came from about above performance. Kevin laughed, too. The admirers laughed, and Tommy grinned the bigger beam anyone had apparent from him all evening. "Your dad had acceptable aftertaste in jokes," Jimmy said, ruffling Tommy's hair. "He had acceptable aftertaste in everything," Tommy replied. "He best the best mom, the best doctors, and the best TV shows to watch aback we were ashore in the hospital. That's aback Kevin fabricated a accommodation that would change Tommy's activity forever." "Tommy," Kevin said, "I appetite to ask you something. Do you bethink in acreage of dreams aback rebuilds the baseball field?" Tommy nodded enthusiastically. "He builds it because he hears articulation that says, if you body it, they will come." "Well, I've been audition a voice too, and it's cogent me that your dad beatific you to us tonight for a reason." Kevin looked at Jimmy, who nodded immediately, compassionate casual amid them afterwards words. "How would you feel about advancing to appointment us sometimes? Maybe you could appear to the appearance whenever your activity abandoned or aback you charge to bethink that your dad's adulation is still actuality with you." Tommy's eyes went wide. "Really? Really?" Jimmy confirmed. "In fact, how would you feel about actuality our official advisor on jokes? Because that one you aloof told was way bigger than annihilation I had planned for tonight." For the aboriginal time back walking assimilate that stage, Tommy looked like what he was, a 7-year-old boy who had aloof been offered article wonderful. "Can I accompany my notebook? I accept added of Dad's belletrist in here. You can accompany whatever you want, buddy. This is your abode now, too." The cameras kept rolling, But anybody accepted that what they were witnessing had annihilation to do with television and aggregate to do with what it agency to be human. 3 people, a allocution appearance host, a cine star, and a little boy angry the hardest action of his life, had begin anniversary added in the best absurd abode and created article beautiful. Tommy Richardson became approved on The Tonight Show, not as a guest, but as family. He would sit backstage during tapings, consulting on jokes, administration belief about his dad, reminding anybody who formed there that amusement and adulation could coexist with anguish and loss. 6 months later, Tommy's blight went into remission. The doctors accustomed his absolute attitude and able abutment system. Tommy accustomed his dad's promises and his new ancestors at 30 Rock. Jimmy Fallon still keeps David Richardson's letter in his board drawer. On difficult canicule aback the ball industry feels bank or meaningless, he reads it and remembers what television can be at its actual best. A arch amid hearts, a admonition that we're all aloof walking anniversary added home. Kevin Costner visited Tommy in Memphis every few months. They would go to baseball amateur and allocution about dreams and architecture things you can't see yet. Kevin accomplished Tommy to bandy a curveball. Tommy accomplished Kevin that adventuresomeness looks altered aback at 7 years old and angry for its life. But the best important assignment came from David Richardson, a man who never got to accommodate his heroes, but who accepted article abstruse about adulation and legacy. That the best able promises are the ones we accumulate alike afterwards we're gone. And that sometimes the best way to say goodbye is to accomplish abiding your adulation finds new agency to appearance up in the world. The anthology Tommy agitated that night now sits in a abode of account in Jimmy's office. It's abounding with belles lettres his ancestor wrote to doctors, to nurses, to the charwoman adult who consistently remembered to ask about Tommy's admired cartoon. Anniversary letter was a very active in the achievement that affection would abound in places David would never see. Those seeds are still growing. Every time Jimmy tells an antic with a little added heart. Every time Kevin chooses a role that reminds him what affairs most. Every time Tommy Richardson, now cancer-free and about 13, shares his adventure with added kids adverse their own absurd battles. David's adulation finds new agency to appearance up in the world. That night Tommy had asked, "Is this heaven?" And 3 actual altered bodies abstruse the acknowledgement together. Heaven isn't a abode you go. It's what you body for the bodies you love, one affiance at a time, one letter at a time, one moment of abrupt adroitness at a time. The acreage of dreams was never absolutely about baseball. It was about architecture, article admirable abundant that adulation could acquisition its way home, alike in the ablaze lights of a television studio. Alike in the amplitude amid goodbye and hello, alike in the 4 simple words of a little boy who knew his ancestor had kept every affiance that any time mattered. He kept his promise. And he did. But there's added to the adventure that didn't accomplish it to television that night. Afterwards the camera chock-full rolling and the admirers had filed out, still wiping tears from their eyes. Article amazing happened backstage. Tommy had collapsed comatose in Jimmy's appointment chair, beat from the affecting weight of the evening. His anthology lay accessible beside him, absolute pages and pages of his father's handwriting. Jimmy and Kevin sat in quiet conversation, neither man absolutely accessible to leave this angelic amplitude they'd all created together. That's aback Kevin noticed article that fabricated him benumb mid-sentence. "Jimmy," he whispered, pointing to the accessible notebook. "Look at the dates." Jimmy leaned closer. Every letter in that anthology was dated. And they weren't accidental dates broadcast above months of illness. They were deliberate, purposeful. David Richardson had accounting a letter for every day he knew he'd absence of his son's life. There was a letter apparent Tommy's 8th birthday, addition for day of 3rd grade. One labeled "Aback you're abashed at night." Addition blue-blooded "Aback you hit your aboriginal home run." Kevin's articulation was about audible. He wrote him a alley map through grief. Jimmy best up the anthology carefully, axis pages with Abbey fingers. There were belles lettres for milestones that were years away. "Aback you alum aerial school, your bell's day, aback you become a father." David Richardson had accounting into approaching he would never see, abrogation breadcrumbs of adulation for his son to acquisition whenever he bare to bethink he wasn't walking this aisle alone. But it was the letter on the actual aftermost folio that bankrupt them both completely. It was addressed not to Tommy, but to whoever would be account these words with him. To the actuality allowance my son backpack these belles lettres it began. Acknowledge you for assuming him that the apple is still abounding of bodies who accept in adulation, alike a back adulation looks altered than we expected. Acknowledge you for proving that promises can be kept by strangers who become ancestors, and that sometimes the best important introductions appear aback were not attractive for them. The letter continued, I charge you to apperceive that every affection you appearance my boy, every moment you advise him bethink he is aces of joy, every time you admonish him that his adventure is still actuality written, you are answering a adoration I've been whispering back the day he was born. Jimmy's easily were afraid as he apprehend the final branch aloud. If you are account this, it agency Tommy begin his way to absolutely area he bear to be. It agency adulation one alike a back blight anticipation, it could booty everything. It agency that about in heaven, a beholden ancestor is watching three bodies prove that ancestors isn't about blood. It's about allotment to appearance up for anniversary added aback at affairs most. That night, Jimmy Fallon and Kevin Costner fabricated a affiance to a man they'd never met, but would never forget. They promised David Richardson that his son would never face addition birthday, addition milestone, addition moment of agnosticism alone. They promised that Tommy's adventure would abide to be accounting with the aforementioned accurate absorption to adulation that David had apparent in every letter. 3 years later, aback Tommy hit his aboriginal Little Alliance home run. Jimmy was in the stands with a video camera. Aback Tommy accelerating elementary school, Kevin flew in from a cine set aloof to be there. And aback Tommy, now 10 years old and cancer-free, stood up at a children's hospital fundraiser to acquaint his story. He began with 4 words that had become his signature. My dad kept promise. Because sometimes the best able belief aren't about the bodies we lose. They're about the adulation that refuses to be active with them. The promises that answer above time and the strangers who become ancestors artlessly by acquainted that every animal affection deserves to be captivated with reverence. David Richardson never met Jimmy Fallon or Kevin Costner, but through the adulation he caked into anthology and the adventuresomeness of a 7-year-old boy, he accomplished 2 acclaimed men article they would backpack for the blow of their lives. That the best important performances appear aback the cameras stop rolling. And that accurate distinction isn't about actuality seen. It's about authoritative abiding others apperceive they are seen, valued, and admired above measure.